Yeah, so the exact steps for this validation networking, and this is going to be a little bit different than the kind of networking that you're used to. So some people have a very transactional approach to networking, right? And a lot of people have this approach and don't realize they have this approach. So it's, I'm going to find places that I want to work, and then I'm going to go on LinkedIn, and I'm going to find people who work there, and I'm going to see if I have any connections with them. And if I don't, I'm going to still message them and just say, hey, I've already applied. Can you flag my application? So how many people are doing something like that now? I'd just like to see like a show of hands, even if it's, a little bit. Yeah, okay. Yeah, a little bit something like that. There's also this other kind of networking that you might be familiar with, which is like the kind of informational networking, so a coffee chat, all of this kind of stuff. And it's a lot of people who are in your current circles a lot of the time for that kind of a thing. Or it's, I want to talk to somebody and something I'm thinking about. But at the end of the day, it's still this so that I can connect with them and then I can give them my CV and then they can get me a job there. And what you see is the walls start coming up, right? So this is a very low return kind of networking because the walls come up. People don't want to risk their political capital, especially in this kind of a job market, on a random person who just messaged them on LinkedIn or on someone who somebody said is a nice person to talk to. Can you please help them out by having coffee with them? These are, they don't hurt your networking. They're just not the best marginal use of your time. Just in all frankness and all transparency, they just aren't the best use of your time. So what you do instead is for each of those hypotheses. So if we can go back to the previous slide, actually, I just want to illustrate this with a real hypothesis. So these take the form of a type of job title. So it doesn't have to be only that exact job title, but put down something that's pretty specific here. So this might be, you've done a lot of communications type stuff, you've done a lot of report writing, you've done a lot of M&E, you've done a lot of external communications, whatever that is. It might be, okay, I think a communications director at let's say a biotech startup. You have a health background, you're interested in going to something kind of adjacent to that. Biotech is an industry that's fascinated you, it still has some purpose drive behind it. So this might be your hypothesis, and then we can go back to the.
Yep.
So what you want to do with that is talk to 5 people for each hypothesis. So communications director at a biotech startup. What you want to do is start with hopefully your warm connections. I know it doesn't seem like you might know a lot of people in the biotech space, but I promise that somebody knows somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who is really in this space and can tell you that. And to the previous question of who to take the advice on your weaknesses from, this is that moment. So this is people who actually know something about this. So you start with your inner circle or warm connections from now, and then what you say here is that you're doing a research project. So you're doing market research, you're trying to get an understanding of what this space looks like, what biotech communications directors do, and you want to talk to people, and you can even be explicit about this of, I'm very much not trying to apply to their company. This is very strictly a market research exercise for me, but being more explicit about that actually helps with people's walls coming down, right? Because they want to help job seekers. They don't want to put their own capital at their workplace on the line for someone they don't know. Again, be entirely non-transactional. Embrace your inner researcher. So I know a lot of people here have a research background, and this is a very common skill set for our space. A lot of people also have a kind of a journalistic mindset and attitude too, of that inner kind of investigative journalist kind of a thing. Pretend you're writing a paper, pretend you're writing a story on what communications directors at biotech startups do, what that whole space is all about. We'll give you specific questions in a moment to ask here. Your goal is to learn everything you can about that from people who actually know something about it, to the previous question. It doesn't matter what your cousin thinks about biotech startups. It doesn't matter what, your colleague from your current job that's not a biotech startup thinks about biotech startups, unless they have some sort of experience with that. And what you're trying to do is get one person closer per conversation until you're circling biotech startup communications functions. And so you go, I don't know anyone at a biotech startup. I actually do know people at a biotech startup. So that's like one thing of I've already made a connection to somebody at a biotech startup for somebody. And it was somebody that we did a wine class with a year ago, right? And it was just they work at a biotech startup, and it was able to make a connection for someone to that. It might say, okay, I don't know anyone there. Spencer might know somebody there. Spencer, do you know anyone at a biotech startup I could talk to about? I'm really trying to understand that space. I'm not looking for an in at their particular company. So you do that. Spencer connects you to somebody there. You talk to somebody there. They might not be at a communications director at a biotech startup, but they work with biotech startups in some capacity. You talk to them. You have this conversation. You say, is there somebody else I can connect with who is a little bit closer to this? Again, the same kind of a research conversation. By 2 or 3 people, you're going to be there. And your goal is to talk to 5 people before you start applying to that space. And that can be really challenging for people, right? Of that's going to take forever. There's no way I can do that. It's not a time limit. It's a gate. It's a number of people to talk to. And the reason we suggest doing this is because when you know from insiders about a space, when you know about what that whole market looks like, you are so much more likely to know what you're doing and to land something in there than applying without that information, being reactive, applying from openings on jobs.